Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science, only on the Pod TV network, where we discuss obviously the updates in the viral infections that are going around the world and some of the new ones that are coming down to our world. And with that, we're going to bring in not a attorney who's an environmental attorney who pretends to know a lot about medicine, nor are we going to bring in the ones of the medical misinformation era. We don't really believe in that. Instead, we're going to go to a board-certified person who's board-certified in internal medicine and a real medical doctor to give you some insights on what's happening in medicine in the United States and, of course, around the world, because he's beaming in outside the world just like I am. We're both outside the United States right now. None other than Dr. Michael Patmos, which he's now extremely well known in his own following around the internet. So Dr. Michael Patmos, I mean, I hear about these new strains of viruses that are going around, and I'm like not real happy about it, because my reading of history, people would get injured and then they would die of the flu. They would get into a fight, they die of the flu. And it always ended with them dying of the flu. And of course, it's flu season, so it's not something on my list. So what's going on in the world of these viruses and flus that are out there?
Well, good morning, Nick. Good morning, everybody. Nick, you've asked a really good question. What about new viruses? We just came through, not quite through, but we just experienced a pandemic from a new virus, SARS-CoV-2, which caused, COVID. And for many people, this was the first time, it seems like, oh, there's a new virus that just emerged. Is this something unusual? Well, I got news for you. It's not unusual. New viruses come out all the time. So just in the last, 50 years or so, there have been something like 400 new viruses that have emerged. Now, it's possible some of them were there, we just didn't know it, but many of them appear to have evolved in the recent few decades. Let me give you some examples, notable examples that will sound familiar, I'm sure. Ebola virus is a new virus. It was just described within the last several decades. Lassa fever, a bad virus, by the way. Hantavirus, you may have heard this. This is the one that's transmitted by mice and found in New Mexico and Arizona. There was even deaths in Yosemite from hantavirus. HIV-1, the AIDS virus, is a new virus. HTLV-2, which HTLV-3, which has been renamed HIV, came from. Hepatitis C virus. This is a very common virus, affects tens of millions of Americans. Hep C is a newly described virus. We didn't know about Hep C when I was in medical school. It might have been there, but we didn't know about it. Human herpes virus type 8. Yes, there are 8 herpes viruses and probably more that are yet to be discovered. West Nile virus. Everyone has, I think, heard of West Nile virus. Human metapneumovirus, Zika virus, Mpox, or what used to be called monkeypox, which has been noted in the United States. And then some of my favorite ones, I love these names. Oropouche is a new virus. Chikungunya is a new virus. Zika virus. We have SARS-CoV-1, which was the original SARS-CoV virus that caused SARS back 25 years ago. And then also SARS-CoV-2, the COVID virus, Lujo virus, H1N1, which is a variant of influenza, the MERS virus, H7N9, which is the avian influenza virus. And then, so that just gives you, there's a lot, there are literally hundreds more. So what is it with these viruses, these new viruses? Is this unusual? No, this is the way it is. This is the way it has always been. Now, it's interesting. Some of the viruses that are not new, like dengue, are spreading into the United States as a result of climate change. Dengue virus has been around. We've known about dengue for a long time. It's in the tropics. But as the earth is warming, the dengue virus its territory is expanding, and it has moved north, and it is now found carried by mosquitoes in places like Florida and Louisiana and in the southern very southern aspects of the United States where it has become more tropical. But the real reason that there's these new viruses coming all the time is because that is the nature of a virus. So for those who are surprised by this, we have to take a step back. And if you understand what a virus is, you understand why there's always going to be new viruses coming out. What is a virus? A virus is not a bacteria. You know, when you were in biology in high school and you put a drop of pond water on the microscope and you looked at it on low power and you saw things swimming around, those are bacteria. Those are protozoans. Those are not viruses. Viruses are an order of magnitude smaller than that. You can't see a virus under a light microscope. You could take 1 million viruses and put them inside a single bacterial cell. Viruses are not living things, technically. They are pieces of genetic code, pieces of RNA or DNA. They're a script, a string of information, like in your computer, when you have a software string of information. That's what a virus is. It's a chemical entity, a piece of nucleic acid. It's a piece of genetic code, and it exists only inside its host. So the viruses are not free out there in the environment, free living. They don't float around and swim around. You get them because you're exposed to an animal or a plant that serves as the host reservoir for the virus. Many of these viruses I talked about before that are now affecting humans have come from the animal world. There's a spillover because we're animals too. We're primates. We're hominids. We're part of the primate family, Primata, basic biology. We are susceptible to the transmission of viruses from other primates. Remember, humans are we have 99% exact same DNA as a chimpanzee. 1% DNA is the difference between us and a chimpanzee. Maybe it's even less than that for Trump. Anyhow, so a virus is a chemical entity. They exist in a host reservoir where they replicate. Now, here's why we get new viruses. Every time a virus is replicated inside your cells or the cells of a monkey or whatever it might be, a bat, there's a chance of an error. Each replication generates the possibility of an error. Here's the analogy. Think of a Xerox copy machine. You know how if you're running 1 million copies, every so often there's a paper jam and a copy comes out all crooked? Well, the same thing happens when viruses are replicating. There can be a mistake in the replication process. A mutation occurs. You get enough mutations, you got a new virus. That's why replication of viruses generates changes which generate evolution, which generates new viruses. The important thing is understanding that there's a host for these viruses. They exist because they're hosted by some species of something. We are now the host for the COVID virus. It is the humans now who are maintaining and perpetuating SARS-CoV-2. So has this been going on forever? Yes, it has been going on forever. There's a branch of biology called paleobiology, and there are paleobotanists and paleozoologists who study fossils and study primitive life forms. I got some news for you. There is evidence from paleobiology that hundreds of species on this planet have gone extinct from viral pandemics. So viral pandemics are not new. They've occurred from the beginning of life on this planet, and viral pandemics have been pretty much established to have wiped out hundreds of species in extinction events. I just say, what does that have to do with us? The Spanish flu wiped out 50 million human beings, 50 million Homo sapiens, our species, our genus, in the order Primata, were wiped out by the Spanish flu between 1918 and 1920. Now, that was about 2 to 3% or so of the entire human population that was wiped out in 2 years. That was a submassive extinction event. So from a biological point of view, we are always at risk. Humans are always at risk for new viruses to emerge that could produce significant. That was the fear with COVID, that it would be another submassive extinction event. In fact, it was. 20 million people died of COVID what stopped the event from being worse was infection control, the thing that I'm trained in. We used infection control procedures, at least in the beginning, to contain the spread. And of course, vaccination to produce immunity. And that was what Trump unraveled because he didn't like the fact that it would affect the economy negatively. So this is what our current leadership doesn't understand. What I just explained to you, this is what Robert Kennedy doesn't understand. This is what Donald Trump doesn't understand. This is what none of the leaders that they've appointed to public health understand, that the flow of new viruses is continuous and never ending, and it always will be. As long as there are animals and plants on this planet hosting viruses, replicating them, there will always be new virus. This is viral evolution. And because of this is why we have to have a strong and functional CDC. This is what the CDC does. They monitor the world for new and emerging threats, new emerging viruses, and then they deploy resources to clamp down on these emerging threats using infection control procedures. And of course, we use vaccination to control and contain these emerging threats to prevent them from becoming submassive or even worse, extinction events. This is why we have to have a CDC. So when Robert Kennedy guts the CDC and Donald Trump allows him to do it, we're putting our entire population at risk for the next emerging viral threat. We have to have a strong CDC. When Robert Kennedy says it's time to take a break from infectious diseases, it gets an impossibly ignorant statement. You can't take a break from infectious diseases. Infectious diseases are not taking a break from us. They're always going to be there. In fact, most disease, jokingly, infectious disease doctors say that all diseases are infectious diseases. Well, I think that's kind of a little bit of an exaggeration, but the reality is most diseases are infectious diseases. What do most people around the world die of? Infectious diseases. Infectious diseases are number one. That's the top thing that kills people around the world. Infectious diseases, malaria, diarrheal illnesses, dysentery, cholera, hepatitis B virus. These are the things that kill people, are infectious diseases. And many of the chronic diseases in the United States that Kennedy likes to talk about, he doesn't realize that at their core, they have infectious disease as their basis. Diabetes type 1 is triggered by an immune reaction to a viral infection. Viral infections cause inflammation in the arteries and disrupt your endothelium and promote clots and endothelial damage. So we can't take a break from infectious diseases, and the emerging viruses prove that. We must have a strong CDC, and basically we got to get rid of all these people in government who don't understand this basic biology that I just explained. So that's my my pleasant, happy message for today. Beware, there's a submassive extinction event just around the corner.
So the CDC provides a valuable service. If you're wondering, what current virus levels are at, except thanks to the shutdown, we haven't had current information in 2 months. It's like, I've been with the same woman for 40 years. I'm not trying to get laid. So I don't mind wearing a mask to the gym and people thinking I'm a weirdo because, I am, and B, I'm not trying to hook up. But if I were 40 years younger, maybe I'd not want to, maybe I'd want to meet somebody at the gym and not be the only person wearing a mask. And to know whether I can safely do that, I would go to the CDC to see what the virus levels are. And I know California still has some functioning health statistics. And I know that right now we're in the lull between the fall viral peak and the Christmas viral peak. So it's fairly safe. But I don't know about the other 49 states. Some states, I'm sure, have decent health departments, and others, probably like Louisiana, have crappy ones.
Yes, yeah, all good points, Rick. Yes, the flu season is just starting to heat up, or cool down, however you want to call it. I mean, it's in the wintertime that it gets rolling. It's still November. We're still a little early. By December, by Christmas, it'll really hit hard. And of course, that's when everybody gets together for the holidays, and the close proximity. We don't have the distance between us. We get closer in the holidays. People are closer to one another. There's more spread of viruses. By January and February, we're going to see tens of thousands of Americans dying of influenza, all of which, of course, is preventable by vaccination.
Yeah. Dr. Patton, you talked about the Spanish flu, which wasn't that long ago, about 100 years ago, and it killed like 50 million people. But before that in time, during the Dark Ages, there was the bubonic plague, and there was plague, and it killed some counts 25% of the world's population died. Was the bubonic plague, was that a virus or a flu, or what the heck was that?
That's a really great example that, we talk about in medical school and in biology circles. The bubonic plague lasted for, I think, a century or so. People lived their entire lives. And then some. A couple of generations, 2-3 generations of people lived through this thing hanging over Europe, the bubonic plague, which killed about 1 in every 3 people in Europe. It still exists today. I've seen patients with bubonic plague. So it's still there. Bubonic plague is a bacterial infection. It's caused by a bacteria that is actually a distant relative of the syphilis bacteria. It's in the Treponema family, and it's a bacteria. It's transmitted by fleas that bite you and that transmit the bacteria into your skin. And these fleas are found on dead rodents. So the connection is rats. So there were a lot of rats running around in Europe in the Middle Ages, and uncontrolled rat population. Rats have fleas. Fleas have bubonic plague, and that's how people got it. The horrible thing, was back in those days. I mean, they said it was because of Jewish people. Jewish people were the cause, and that belief went all the way up through, including to the time of Hitler. Blaming a group of people for a disease. We see that today when people blame immigrants for disease. So that same kind of prejudicial ignorance is out there. But yes, bubonic plague is a bacterial infection. It's not a viral infection.
There's a great movie comes out on Thanksgiving called Hamnet. It's going to win a zillion Oscars. Takes place in 1596, and plague is an element of the plot. But even back then, they almost got it right in some ways, that the guys who went around to collect the dead wore these weird bird masks over their entire face, which functioned to give them some protection against, I mean, not a lot, but,
I had a quick question for Dr. Patton. It's actually based on a guest that we're going to have later on next week. And definitely Nick will be glad to hear about this guest. There's a young lady that is going to be making a appearance that has got flying cars and everything like the jets and all along those lines. So she's going around the country, and right now I think she was in North Carolina last week and everything. But with that being said, there's a lot of people, and Rick, she's out of LA and everything like that. But she is thinking about flights and going to different places and everything. So that got me to thinking about, this is vacation time. So a lot of our friends are going to be coming and flying in from various places now that the air traffic controllers are back at work and everything like that. So what methods would you give to people in this modern day age to be safe from viruses if they're going to be on a plane? Because we know planes can be very much of their own private incubators for disease and everything like that. So what advice would you give to people that are going to be flying during the Thanksgiving holiday?
Great question, Mark. Got a few comments on that. So first of all, depending upon where you're going in the world, you may need to be immunized against something or vaccinated against something. There are parts of the world where there are still things like malaria and, yellow fever, and you might need to be vaccinated. Check the CDC website has information on this. You want to do this well before you travel. Don't wait until the day before you go. You won't be able to get the treatment. You want to go well before you travel, about a month or two before you travel, and go to a travel clinic. There are There are clinics. Usually, actually, you can find them at major airports. You call travel clinics or at academic medical centers where infectious disease doctors who specialize in travel medicine, preparing people for travel depending upon what part of the world you're going to. So there's that, so you want to check ahead of time what vaccines are required in the part of the world you're going to be visiting. The other thing is when you get on an airplane, the airplane engineers like to say, oh, the filtration on an airplane is so good, you can't spread. That's fine. The filtration on an airplane is great. It only works when the airplane is turned on, when the engines are running. You have all that time at the gate in the airport, waiting for your flight, boarding, in the boarding tunnel, sitting on the plane while everybody's boarding. The engines are not on. There's no filtration. So in that period of time, you got people crammed in together. People have come from all over, some of whom are going to be sick and incubating and spreading viruses and not realize it. Wear a mask. When you're in the airport, smart people wear masks in the airport. And once you're on the plane and the engines are running, and then the risk goes down. Now, the final thing I would say is travel. Yes, travel. Travel somewhere, go someplace better. There's a whole lot of places in the world where things are better, where people are kind and nice. I happen to be in love right now with Central America. I've met people from Belize and Guatemala and Honduras. These are the sweetest, kindest people I have ever known. So get out of your Fox News cocoon.
Hey, I'm glad you said that. Hold on a second.
Let me continue the plane stuff. So you have nozzles above your head for air. Hog the nozzles. Have them all shooting down at you. You get a stream of fresh air. So I dodged COVID for 5.5 years, and I finally caught it on a plane, on a 4-hour flight out of Chicago. They sat me next to a 12-year-old kid who was coughing the whole time.
He had it.
And I didn't want to be rude because, the black kid, I didn't want to be a Karen thing, I don't want to sit next to him. So, but the kid coughed the whole time. I should have probably been rude and asked the flight attendant to have the kid wear a mask or something. I took my mask off to eat the meals. I love airplane food. I'm weird that way. Probably shouldn't have done that.
I'm glad that you gave support to Belize, by the way, Dr. Patmos, because a friend of mine, a professor at North Carolina Central University, used to take his students regularly to Belize, and he also has a love affair with Belize as well. He sounded it's one of the most prettiest countries that he has ever been to, and he's definitely hoping to go back at some point. But I know that he used to take his students, I want to say for 3 or 4 years, that were his students in journalism to that particular country. And it was a wonderful country, and he definitely, my friend Brett Chambers, is a big fan of Belize.
So I want to say pandemics don't just kill people from the disease itself. There are knock-on effects. For instance, tens of thousands of Americans, maybe hundreds of thousands, came down with more serious cancer than they would have otherwise because they put off diagnostics and treatments because the hospitals were chaos in the middle of the pandemic. So they waited, and maybe a stage 1 cancer went to stage 2, and heart treatments and all that stuff, all this other medical stuff, and if you look back 100 years at the Spanish flu, the world went to hell in the 20 years after the Spanish flu. Fascism, worldwide depression, world war, and some people would argue that the people who recovered from the flu, a lot of them maybe had worse brains because it affected your brain. And there was also social disruption from having to bury, one person in 30. And all this compounded the many, many problems of the world back then, similarly to the way that COVID compounds our problems. And maybe if it gets into your brain, which it does, it's an inflammatory disease. And your brain doesn't do well with inflammation. If COVID has made 50 million Americans a little bit stupider, then it has hurt us as a democracy.
Yeah.
So I want to just follow up on one thing the point you made there, Rick. You're absolutely right. One of the things that's interesting about the Spanish flu back in 1918, 1920 is of course, there was no vaccines back then. We didn't even have antibiotics back then. That was before penicillin was discovered. So people got influenza. And by the way, the Spanish flu killed young, healthy people more than any other group. Young, healthy men were its primary victims. But there was a big debate, a raging debate in the United States back then in 1918 about masking. And the city of Philadelphia said, hell no, we're not going to mask. We don't want that infringement on our freedom. In Los Angeles, the mayor said, you're going to mask. And everybody in LA was required to wear a mask. Well, guess what happened between 1918 and 1920 in Philadelphia versus Los Angeles? Los Angeles had Spanish flu. They didn't have nearly the death toll that they had in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, where they rejected masks, they ran out of coffins. And there are pictures, black and white pictures from 1918 and 1919 in the winter, where they had no place to put the corpses, and they stacked them on the street corners on pallets, waiting for the wagons to come and take the corpses away. That's the image people need to have about the Spanish flu in Philadelphia, with thousands of Philadelphians dying with their corpses being stacked on the streets because they didn't want to wear a mask. So when you hear,
I have more details about that, where Philadelphia and a lot of cities, it was the end of World War I. Philadelphia had a big ass parade welcoming the soldiers back. And, tens of thousands of people turned out, and it was a mass infection event. Now, also, what did Spain do wrong that they were the source of Spanish flu? They didn't do anything wrong. The Spanish flu started in the United States, but it got named the Spanish flu after it spread to Spain, and the King of Spain came down with it.
And that's what I got named Spanish flu. Hey, Dr. Pappas, I know we're winding down, but I was actually just in an award ceremony. The Cultural Arts Center that I work for had received one for its role in historic preservation, and there were a number of other people there as well. But in going to events, and I'm sure Rick has noticed it as well, less people are masking. I don't think that I saw a person wearing a mask, and there was probably a couple of hundred people at this particular event. So would you still recommend that people be wearing masks at this particular day and time, or have we got past masks? Because you're bringing up masks, and like I said, I was singing, and it was an award ceremony, and hopefully I know that my parents had, my dad and his girlfriend had an event, and somebody came down with COVID at the event, and then they gave us notice about it. And I think that was back in either October or September and everything like that. But I just wanted your take on whether we should be masking in 2025 in November.
There's good epidemiologic evidence. It's retrospective. It's not the best evidence possible, but we have reasonable evidence that masks clearly reduce the incidence of respiratory infections. If you are sick and you have a respiratory infection, wear a mask. You're going to be less likely to infect the person next to you. And if you're traveling and you're in a very congested environment with a lot of people, recognize that some of those people are sick. They're spewing viruses or bacteria. They're not wearing a mask, so you should wear one. Our masks, 100%, they take them off to eat. They take them off at a ball game. They're not perfect, but they're better than nothing. So yes, masking is a core pillar of infection control, along with social distancing. Masking is a core pillar of infection control. You should continue to mask in crowded places. There's nothing wrong with this. Very smart. Airports are the best place to do it.
And with that, we're going to be flying away. So we do want to thank Dr. Michael Pappas, who brings us up to date on medicine and science. And it's important for all the travelers about wearing a mask, because the problem I have is they required us to have vaccine cards, or they wouldn't let you travel. And I think it makes sense, because I'm like Rick. I get on planes a lot. I don't like the person next going bleh, 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 like that through the entire plane trip. And I'm going like, well, it's because I don't want to wear a mask, or I don't want to take a COVID shot. You're infringing on my freedom. I mean, it was disgusting. But for the effect, I mean, seriously, I don't like that. But we do want to thank Dr. Michael Pappas and our people.
Happy Garifuna Day. It's
Yeah,
Garifuna Day.
and stay safe. Wear a mask. I guess that's the best advice when you go to travel. And we'll see you not next week because we have Thanksgiving in the United States, which they don't recognize too much here, but the week after. And take care. We'll see you on the best. Bye bye.